2025, unless a resolution of approval or disapproval is introduced. This appointment will fill a vacant seat formerly held by Clarence Labor for the remainder of an unexpired term that will end April 6, 2030. Before hearing from Ms. Winston, I would like to provide the public with background information about the Office of Employee Appeals, followed by background on Ms. Winston's work experience. The Office of Employee Appeals is an independent administrative adjudicatory agency that processes appeals filed by the district government's workforce. The office is commonly referred to as the OEA, consists of five-member board, an executive director, a general counsel's office, and an administrative support team, and 6 administrative judges. OEA has jurisdiction over appeals in which an employee has been 1, removed because of an adverse action for cause, or 2, placed on an enforced leave, or 3, suspended for 10 days or more, or 4, subjected to a reduction in force, or 5, affected by a safety-sensitive designation. Now I'll talk a little bit about our nominee, Ms. Pia Winston. Ms. Winston is a labor and employment attorney specializing in litigation. She has served on the National Labor Relations Board as an attorney for almost 7 years. Presently, she is a senior trial attorney at the board in the Contempt, Compliance, and Special Litigation branch. Prior to the National Labor Relations Board work, she was a member of a law firm, Mahalik and Scalant. I hope I pronounced those somewhat proper, for 4 years, where she focused on labor and employment law as an associate attorney and fine justice fellow. As an associate and fellow, Ms. Winston represented local unions, mid-level and executive employees, and class action groups. Her portfolio included issues ranging from wage hour violations and discrimination and discipline cases. Ms. Winston has developed litigation strategies and has ample experience leading arbitration processes and negotiations. Ms. Winston is a Ward 7 resident who has earned her Bachelor's of Arts in Anthropology and African American Studies from the University of California, Berkeley, and her Juris Doctorate from William and Mary Law School. I look forward to a full conversation today, and at this time, I will recognize any of my colleagues who may be on virtual. All right. We see none at this time, so therefore I will turn to our public witness. Do we have a? Yeah. All right, we're waiting for Miss Portia Winston to accept. Has she accepted it? Not yet. Okay, we are waiting to get her on, and we'll give her a few minutes to make her presentation. All right. Ms. Winston? Yes. Miss Winston, we cannot hear you. Can you turn your mic on?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. And could you turn your video on also, if
Yes,
possible? There we go. Thank you.
close. Hi, yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the instructions.
We are ready to just take your testimony. We've already introduced the office and its responsibilities. And so, and a little bit of background about Pierre Winston's career. And so now we're ready to hear from you if you would like.
Awesome, thank you. First, I'd like to thank the board for giving me this opportunity to explain the relationship that I have with Pia Winston and her work throughout her career. Um, Pia Winston is my sister, my twin sister. She has had an exemplary career since she graduated from William and Mary um, um, from law school. She's dedicated her career to helping others. She's a wonderful mentor. She has a lot of experience with employment law and mentoring others in employment law, especially young Black women. She has been a resource for her colleagues, her friends, her family, and she is one of the best people I know. And I'm happy to provide any answers to any questions that you might have. And she's definitely an exemplary lawyer. She's an exemplary human being, an exemplary mother, and happy to endorse her for this position. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. May I ask, as your twin sister, I assume you are very close.
Yes, very close.
All right, and so then you know a lot about her personality, her work habits, perhaps. Is that true?
That's true,
Great.
yes.
We received a number of support letters for your sister. And I just wanted to share some of them with you. And maybe you can tell me if this is, in your opinion, a true statement about your wonderful sister as you have described her. Okay. She has the ability to balance her professional success and career growth while remaining grounded in her community. Is that a description of your sister?
That's a very accurate description of her, except I would add that she also has mastered the balance of work, professional life, and also being a new mother.
Okay, excellent. Also, would you say that early in her career, she chose to support her community? In other words, to protect the rights of working people, making sure they receive fair treatment and are engaged in a safe workplace? Do you know that much about her career?
Yes, yes. Uh, we've been together in the same city for the entire time that she's been a lawyer, and she's gone through many different aspects of her career, and all of them throughout every different position that she had, she maintained making sure that people had access to representation when they had employment issues. Even if she wasn't able to provide that, she was able to refer them to those who could.
Thank you. Also, another witness indicated that they have seen firsthand her dedication to improving the lives of those she serves and her willingness to go above and beyond to ensure that all voices are heard. Do you see her as a person who is making sure that everyone has voice on issues that are before her?
Absolutely. I think she has expressed to me numerous times that she got into this line of work so that she would be able to provide those types of services to make sure that those who are usually not recognized or unseen were able to have that voice and be able to be represented when needed.
Now, this is a big one I want to ask you about. Have you witnessed firsthand as she navigates the complexities of law with skill, precision, and dedication?
I have. I personally am not a lawyer, but just watching her throughout her career, she's been able to um, navigate those nuances of the law, a lot of which I may not understand, but she has a way of explaining it so that I can understand it, which I think is definitely an asset, especially when you're dealing with those who may not understand the law themselves. Um, so yeah, I would definitely attest to that.
All right. Well, I thank you very much for putting that on our public record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we will turn to our nominee, Ms. Pia Winston, and I will swear you in, and then we would like to get your personal testimony. And welcome this morning. If you raise your right hand, we'll swear you in. Do you swear and affirm that your testimony and any statements made before us today to be truthful and complete? Thank you. And you can begin when you're ready. There you go.
Good morning, Chairperson Bonds and members of the Committee on Executive Administration and Labor. My name is Pia Winston, and it is my pleasure to receive your consideration for my nomination to serve on the board of the Office of Employee Appeals. I'm grateful to Mayor Muriel Bowser for nominating me and honored to have this opportunity to serve the residents of our district. Throughout my life and career, I have been engaged in public service in each community I've been a part of. Civil rights and advocacy for those without the means or ability to advocate for themselves has always been the undercurrent of my passions and community involvement. It was with this spirit of service that propelled me into my career in labor and employment law. In my early life and career, I had the privilege to work with employees undergoing various class action employment issues. It was then that I understood the juxtaposition between civil rights and employment as many civil rights issues came to a head on the job. Employment issues are very personal and occupy a significant portion of people's lives. We spend most of our days at work and are thrust into situations most people do not engineer for themselves. This makes employment situations particularly ripe to lead to numerous issues that have the capability of affecting people's lives and livelihood. With this understanding, I knew that a career in labor and employment law would feed my passion for helping people. Throughout my career, from counseling clients on an individual or class basis to managing numerous complex litigation issues, I have found that the practice of labor and employment law is incredibly fulfilling. I have a breadth of relevant experience that will assist the board in the processing of employee appeals. My career has afforded me the opportunity to work with many different employees and employers in various dispute resolution settings, in litigation, and in advice and consulting. I have tried cases under numerous federal labor law and employment statutes and have negotiated mutually beneficial settlements for both sides. In my current role at the National Labor Relations Board, I am tasked with approaching cases with impartiality. I must assess whether or not sufficient evidence exists to prosecute matters in contempt. I am well-versed in both the trial and appeals process and understand fully the function of the board members as the NLRB board functions similarly on a national scale. Having this experience will enable me to quickly and efficiently assess appeals while also applying my industrial knowledge and understanding of employment matters. The OEA board is a necessary resource for employees in the district. I envision the board as a refuge for district employees who would not otherwise have the ability or opportunity to challenge adverse employment actions. Making this office accessible to agency employees ensures that their voices are heard. This also ensures that both employees and district agencies share an equal footing throughout the process. If confirmed, my goal as a board member is to serve the employees and agencies of the district to the best of my ability. I will be fair and issue unbiased opinions rooted in DC law and policy. Using my experience and knowledge of labor and employment issues, I am sure that I will be able to make a significant impact on the board and provide a new perspective to employee appeals. I'd also like to add that I am a proud resident of Ward 7 and a DC homeowner, and I'm very excited for this opportunity to serve our district. Thank you, Chairperson Bonds, for the opportunity to testify before this committee. I would be happy to respond to questions from you and the members of the committee.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I just wanted to go back to you where you indicate you understand the difference between civil rights and employment, as well as civil rights issues and how it came to head on the job. Can you give us some sort of an example of how that plays out in the real world?
Sure. I can give you the story about why I actually decided to go into labor and employment law. I was working as a paralegal in a class action employment firm in Oakland, California, and part of my job was to call possible class members to figure out whether or not they were receiving the same discriminatory treatment as other class members throughout the state of California. One of the first things that I realized was a lot of the complaints that employees had were complaints that I would hear about from my mother or my aunts on their jobs. A lot of times it was just, they were happy that somebody was listening to them, because a lot of times they just thought that they would have to suffer in silence. A lot of things that I thought were unlawful were happening to these people, and I realized that people didn't really talk about it, because when you have an employer who is mistreating you, a lot of times people don't have the agency to speak up or say anything, because that's the person who's paying their bills, giving them their checks. A lot of racial and discrimination issues were coming across my desk. And it was then that I realized that this particular environment, the employment environment, was ripe for a lot of discrimination issues that people just didn't talk about anymore. And so I've kind of decided at that point that if I wanted to affect the world in a positive way, and I wanted to focus on civil rights, and employment was a powder keg of civil rights issues.
Thank you for that. You said you've tried cases under numerous federal labor and employment statutes and have negotiated mutually beneficial settlements for both sides. In today's world, I'd be very curious as to what that might mean.
So in my previous job in private practice, I did a lot of work with employees who were dealing with wage and hour disputes, wage and hour issues under the Federal Labor Standards Act, the FLSA. One of the things that was beneficial to working with these employees was that we were able to negotiate large settlements on behalf of federal agencies for these employees that were underpaid, not paid properly, and they were able to recoup a lot of the wages that they weren't able to get. But that was just one way. That was in 2017, 2016. But I did a lot of those kinds of cases, working with federal agencies, working with unions specifically, to come to mutually beneficial agreements when it was established that violations of the FLSA had taken place.
All right, and in that kind of work, did you ever have a situation where there was a mutual agreement you had a win-win on both sides. Just curious.
That doesn't usually happen. There's always going to be somebody who is not as happy with the agreement as others, but especially when you're dealing with larger agencies and also people who really just want to be heard. It's a lot easier to get consensus on both sides when both sides feel like they have had a chance to get their views across.
Thank you. I must ask this, as contemporary times, and so in thinking about the announced likelihood of reductions in force, how do you see the work at your current job really moving forward? I mean, are you thinking great volumes of appeals, concerns that you have to address, or just what?
Well, when you say my current job, you're speaking about the NLRB?
Yes.
Okay. So for my job in the NLRB, in contempt, compliance, and special litigation, those particular issues and reductions in force, different things like that, don't necessarily come across my desk. The way that my job works is I come in well after an unfair labor charge has been filed, there's been an adjudication, there's been a board order saying yes or no, and it's also gone up to a federal appeals court. So I come in after that fact. So a lot of my job is generally unaffected. However, other branches within the agency will be seeing a lot more of the brunt of what those potential rifts could potentially mean. And it all has to do with, because I work in the labor realm, what the collective bargaining agreements are with different unions and how those particular agreements have set up how to deal with those issues. But me personally, generally, and in my space within the NLRB, I couldn't give you a specific answer on how other people would be affected. I just know it wouldn't necessarily affect my job.
All right. And so in thinking about the board that you are nominated for, how do you handle collective bargaining agreements? And is the collective bargaining viewed as sacrament or just what?
I mean, it depends. I know that some of the DC employees are unionized, some are not. Some have collective bargaining agreements, some don't. Some of those collective bargaining agreements require procedural steps that have to be taken whenever an adverse employment action comes into fruition. And I think it's on a case-by-case basis that the OEA would be able to hear those particular things. But in terms of whether or not, I think your question is whether or not collective bargaining agreements are good or bad. Is that what you're getting at in your question?
Not really. I'm just wondering how you would handle them and whether or not, there would be an occasion when collective bargaining agreement would not hold up based on the evidence that you're looking at your employee, appeals. And so just wondered about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's on a case-by-case basis, and it really has to do more specifically with the four corners of the collective bargaining agreement. What is required, what's not required, and whether or not those steps have been exhausted before getting to the OEA board.
Okay. Just switch up here. Now I'll get to some, that was just based on your comments. Now I just have a very few questions.
Okay.
All right. There's a question here. I think you've already answered this, but if you'd like to add to it, if you can elaborate on how your professional background has prepared you to best review employee appeals cases.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of my life's work. I
Your
have
thing.
worked with employees my entire life. I have kind of made it the undercurrent of everything I do is to ensure that employees have a voice. And also on the other side of that, a lot of people don't realize that employers are not always evildoers. And I think that it's important to ensure that both employees and employers have an equal footing in especially a process like this, because I know that there are potential, removals or adverse employment actions that could potentially be very warranted, but might kind of fail the in public opinion whether or not those particular employees should or should not have been let go. But I think that it's this office of employee appeals generally is very, very good because it allows both the agency and the employee to have a voice. Because sometimes they're warranted and sometimes they're not. But I'm glad that there is a space where those two things can collide and we can make a decision.
So how do you see as your role as a member of this board? We have the director, the general counsel, part-time and full-time administrative judges. So how do you see, when do you get involved? How do you see being involved in this office?
So as I understand it, as a member of the board, it would come to me on a petition for review to the general 5-member board. And we would have to decide whether or not we would allow a review, deny or grant a review, and then make a final decision that's appealable to DC Superior Court. I understand that statutorily that's how the process works. In terms of me and my ability to contribute to this board, I think that because I have a lot of experience dealing with employees, dealing with employers, and a breadth of knowledge of employment and labor statutes, issues, policies, that I can positively contribute to the board and be able to provide a perspective that might not be there already.
All right, and so your style of work, operation, is it one where you are knee-deep into the weeds of the law, or are you also a person who's reading the room and reading the body language and you know where I'm going?
I understand. I think that has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, especially now in this time where there's not a lot of in-person things. There might not be in-person hearings or even Zoom hearings. Maybe it's just what comes across my desk in terms of, an appeal. I think that if a case requires, further research into the weeds, I'm absolutely prepared to do that, to come out with the right decision, and a decision that is in line with DC law and policy. If it's a situation where, it's very persuasive, somebody's demeanor, especially when giving testimony or speaking to the truth of a particular matter, that's where a lot of those body language things come in. To the extent that that happens before me, sure, those can also be taken into account. But I think it does have to be on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you for that. If board members were to have a substantive disagreement on a particular case, how would you approach the situation if you were kind of in the realm of having to resolve it?
That's a good question. Conflict resolution, that's what we do, right? Yeah, I think that, and especially just taking a look at some of the decisions that have come out from the board, it seems like they've all kind of been unanimous, which is great, which means that they do a lot of hard work in talking and trying to figure out what the right decision is. And I think that I can contribute to that. Like I said, with my experience, with my understanding, with my knowledge of labor law, if, it's a contentious situation where there's, two on one side, two on another side, and maybe I'm in the middle or some other iteration. I think that just communicating, making sure that we're sticking to what the law says, I think that's usually a pretty good demarcation, is what does the law say and how do these facts apply to this law? And you can either come on the left side or you can come on the right side of that. And kind of driving the ship that way, I think is a good way to try to get consensus among people, because the law is usually black and white. Sometimes it can be, interpreted in different ways, but depending on what the situation is, I think we can be guided by the law.
Okay. So how do you intend on remaining current on labor law and the matters of employees and management expertise within the workforce? What's your approach to that?
Well, everyday life, but generally, yes, everyday life. I see things that come across my desk a lot. From my current job, I kind of have my finger on the heartbeat of what's going on in labor and unions. Also, we have a lot of CLEs to make sure that we are up to date on everything that's happening currently in labor and employment law. And also, to be honest, peers and people who do practice law differently or in other aspects of labor law than I do. I have a lot of different colleagues within this genre of law, and I get a lot of different current reviews of what's going on, what people are seeing, what their clients are talking about, kinds of trends that are coming across people's desks that I think are really good to keep in mind and remember, especially when dealing with employee appeals.
So I'm going to make the assumption that you've been given somewhat of a review of the breadth of the work of the board, but more so the trends over the last few years. And I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts about how you see the agency being improved or moving forward?
That's a good question. I think that the answer would require a conversation with my fellow board members who have kind of been on the ground and making those hard decisions. As a newcomer, I would really want to seek guidance from them in terms of why these decisions have been coming out the way they've been coming out, what the purpose behind it was. Because as an outsider currently, all I can do is look at what is posted online. But kind of getting into the weeds of the thought process behind these decisions, I think is something that I think requires a look before an assumption.
Right. So you have not done or completed any analysis of what the agency is doing. You're ready to just get in there and make it happen as it comes before you.
Absolutely.
In fact, have you met with any of the board members or within the office or?
I have.
Okay.
Deanna Maria Lewis was actually somebody who told me about this position.
Okay.
She and I have been friends and colleagues for years, literally over a decade. I spoke with her specifically about, the board and everything that they do. and how I would be a good fit for this board, considering my knowledge and experience. And she vehemently recommended that I try to get on this board. So
All right, well, I'm going to go to just a few questions that are contained in the survey that you received. Okay. Have you ever been investigated, disciplined, or cited for a breach of ethics for unprofessional conduct by or been the subject of a complaint to any court, administrative agency, professional association, disciplinary committee, or other professional group?
no, ma'am.
Do you or any member of your family have any interest financially or otherwise that may directly or indirectly pose a conflict of interest for you in the performance of your duties?
No,
Have you ever received a written warning, been officially reprimanded, suspended, or disciplined for misconduct in the workplace?
no,
Have you ever received a written warning, been officially reprimanded, suspended, or disciplined for violating a security rule or policy?
no.
All right. Well, we have your survey information, and also we're very happy to have the opportunity to meet with you, and we will move forward. And thank you very much.
Thank you so
All
much.
right. Members of the public who wish to submit any comments on this confirmation, please do so by going to the council's hearing management system located, or you can go to the email seal@dccouncil.gov, and that's CEAL@dccouncil.gov. The public record on this matter will remain open until Friday, December the 6th at 5 p.m. And I want to thank all of those who may have joined us in one fashion or the other, remotely, and those who are here with us today. For those who want to submit testimony, please do so by the 5 p.m. on Friday, December the 6th. And this concludes today's public roundtable. Thanks again to our nominee and to those who are here and to those who tuned in. And with that, the time is exactly 12